Hi guys, this is Nadia Andreeva of spinachandyoga.com, and I work with women as a wellness coach to help them find a non-restrictive approach to eating and improve their digestion. And today we have an amazing topic, a topic which I think a lot of you will connect with. It's a topic of how to prevent sugar cravings. And I want to really underline that we're talking about prevention, not managing cravings at the time that they already appeared. And I think it's a topic that hasn't been really talked about that much. So I'm sure you're going to learn a lot, a lot of really useful tips throughout the class. And in my practice, when I work with women around digestive health, around weight loss, oftentimes the question of being addicted to sugar comes up. And whenever people plan their wellness transformation or become or want to become healthier, oftentimes they think of sugar as being the enemy. And actually, if you haven't watched How to Plan a Wellness Transformation, there's a class on Entheos that I really advise you to watch. But now let's talk about sugar. And I want to share in this class a roster of tips that I used for myself because I do have a sweet tooth, and I used for hundreds of women that I worked with in my practice. And I picked and choose those that are the most effective. And the thing that we really gonna highlight in the class is we're gonna talk both about the physical aspects of sugar cravings, but also about the emotional ones. Because usually people address one or the other, but you have to address both. And particularly, you have to really understand what's the root cause of you having those cravings, which can be biochemical. It can be really triggered by certain processes in your blood, or it can be just a habitual process, or it can also be very emotional. And for women, it is oftentimes more emotional than physical. So we'll try to address all of them. And lots of tips that I'm going to be talking about, they're coming from several sciences or several fields of knowledge, which I really love to rely on when I create classes or work with clients. One of them is Ayurveda, which is an Indian traditional science of health and life. Another one is mindfulness and mindful eating, which I think is essential because it really allows you to tap into the internal, into the body wisdom, besides the external wisdom that you can find by reading books or talking to the experts. So mindfulness is really the key to understanding the body and finding what works for you the best. Um, so I think those are the main things, but we'll also touch a little bit upon psychology, because without changing the habits, even if you understand something logically, you really can't get very far. We need to understand how we work, how our behaviors are formed, and get our subconscious on board whenever we're trying to work, especially with addictions or any behavior change. So let's dive into the first tip of preventing sugar cravings or breaking the sugar addiction. And this one is really big for a lot of women that I work with, is that sugar is love for a lot of us. So whenever you ask yourself a question regarding what is sweets, what are sweets for me? And just for a moment, you can just close your eyes and think of what is really that sweet taste? What does it represent for me? And for a lot of women, when I ask them this question, they say that sweets is joy, it's pleasure, it's love. And the sweets are usually the only source of those feelings for a woman. And I think it's really important to recognize that, because love is a necessary emotion for our body, for our being. So if we don't get that emotion through our relationships, through our work, through interaction with the world, then we're gonna crave for that feeling. And in Ayurveda, sweet taste is associated with love and compassion. And a lot of times we don't give ourselves enough love and compassion sourced from other areas of our life. So one of the exercises that I often ask women to do is create a list of things that you really love and things that make you feel that you are loved. And really spend some time with it. Create as long of a list as you can, not five little kind of numbers, but create 50 or at least 30. Create a list of things that you love that you maybe have forgotten or that you haven't recently had time to experience because you got so busy and you're so focused on your to-do list and your work that you forgot those things that bring the emotion of love into your life. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a love that only a partner or a person can give you. It can be love that you get from your pet. It can be a love that you feel towards nature when you fully experience nature, not through your iPhone, but actually being in the moment and being fully aware of what's happening and observing the beauty of nature. Um, Dr. Vasant Lad, one of my favorite teachers in Ayurveda, says that food is the food for the body and love is the food for the soul. So don't keep your soul hungry and find those things that really create a feeling of love and being loved in ways that are not related to food. So that's the first exercise for you. And another thing here that's important to notice is it's not only love for other people, it's also love for yourself. So the next time you look in the mirror, and that might be difficult in the beginning, but try to experiment with it. Say a compliment to yourself. Say something that makes you feel loved. As if you were expressing love towards yourself. And I found that even though we do have a lot of resistance to doing that, once you do that, once you overcome that resistance, while you start saying to yourself how much you appreciate and love yourself, even if it's just part of yourself in the beginning, it makes a huge difference. So try it, experiment with it, and see if it does make a difference for you. So the next thing, the next step that we're focusing on is six tastes. And that comes from Ayurveda. And if you've heard of it, great, but most Westerners haven't. And the concept of sweet taste is very interesting because it says that we do need to have all six tastes in our meals to be completely satisfied on all levels. And the six tastes in Ayurveda are sweet, sour, salty, bitter, astringent, and pungent. Those are the six tastes that are representative of all macro elements and micro elements. So whenever you get all of those six tastes in a plate, you're very likely to also get all the necessary macronutrients and all the necessary micronutrients. So you're getting your vitamins and minerals. Besides getting enough carbs, fat, and protein. And that's really important. And in Western diet, most of us have three tastes that are predominant. We have sweet, sour, and salty. And whenever we don't have all six tastes, we start creating an imbalance. And whenever we have some sort of an imbalance, we start having cravings. There's also the opposite side of it. A lot of people who are trying to be healthy, who are on a health kick and doing lots of detoxes, they start having lots of bitters in their diet, which is bitters which come mostly from bitter greens. And that can create an imbalance as well. But we're going to talk specifically about bitters just in a minute. Let's talk about all other tastes. So in Ayurveda, each taste has a particular quality and a function. So you need to include all six of them to create a balanced meal. And I wouldn't worry about doing that for breakfast or dinner. You can just start by creating a balanced lunch. So let's go over each taste and see what you can add to create a balanced plate. So sweet is the main taste. And by sweet in Ayurveda, we don't necessarily mean anything that tastes sweet. In Ayurveda, proteins, grains, fats are also considered sweet. So if somebody is not having enough protein or not having enough fat, they can start craving sweets because your body needs to get it from someplace. So it's really important to make sure that you have some sort of a healthy carb, which can be a sweet potato, butternut squash. If you eat grains, it can be grains. Um, and then also have some sort of a protein and enough fat, which I'm sure all the viewers of Entheos, you're not fat phobic, but it's always good to check in with yourself to make sure that you do have a good source of fat, which can be olive oil, avocado, or some nuts and seeds. The second taste is sour taste, and sour taste is incredibly important for you to be able to digest your proteins and fats, because sour really helps with digestion processes. It helps with bile production. So fats and proteins can be quite heavy, and a lot of people don't have enough acid in their body to digest those. So by traditionally in Ayurveda, each meal had to be accompanied by having something sour, which can be a little bit of lime juice or a little bit of lemon juice. And now Western medicine or functional medicine is catching up and says that it would be really helpful to have some fermented vegetables, which has a sour taste. Or you can have a little bit of coconut kefir before your meal, which will also help your digestion. So Ayurveda and functional medicine are quite aligned in that one. And sours can also come from vinegar, from some sort of pickles, as long as they're not pasteurized. And also, if you digest dairy, it can come from sour cream or a little bit of yogurt. So make sure you have a little bit of sours. And for me personally, I find that having lime juice and sprinkling everything with lime juice is the easiest way to have sours. The next taste is salty. And we do need salty because salty helps us with production of enough saliva. And you need to have enough saliva to be able to digest the food well. And salty is the easiest probably one to get in the Western diet. You have, we add salt almost everywhere, but also seaweed is a great source of salty foods. Celery is a great source. So making sure that you have a little bit of salt. And the next three tastes are a little bit more rare in the Western diet. So pay close attention here because they're incredibly important in terms of preventing cravings, not managing, but exactly preventing, giving your body enough to begin with so it's not craving for something else later. So pungent taste is the hottest of all. So think chili pepper. And I'm sure you've seen lots of research or articles about saying that having spicy foods, having pungent foods really helps with metabolism and getting really good circulation, getting the juices in the body flowing, including digestive juices. So you can add, the easiest way to add that is some sort of a spice, which can be just a black pepper. If you're really feeling sluggish and mucusy, then you can add some cayenne pepper. It can also be from radishes like daikon. So having a little bit of that in a diet helps to really stimulate blood circulation so your digestion is optimal. The next one is bitter taste. And we need bitters because it helps to regulate acidity, and it also helps in almost the same way that sours do with production of bile. And this is the most lacking taste in the Western diet. Most Americans, unfortunately, get their bitter taste from coffee. So if you add bitter taste through other foods, there's a small likelihood that maybe your cravings for coffee will disappear as well. Bitter taste is the main source of antioxidants. And we're going to talk about sources of bitters because I feel like it's such a special topic that we have a specific time to talk about bitters. So having something bitter, and I just want to make sure that before we move on, you understand that bitters are not only good for preventing sugar cravings, they're also amazing for stimulating detoxification, preventing skin rashes, helping with water retention. So if somebody has edema and preventing nausea or burning sensations of some sort. And good sources of it can be turmeric, it can be bitter greens. Zucchini and dandelion are actually considered bitters as well. And you can have grapefruit or bitter melon. All of those have a little bit of a bitter taste added to them. And the next one is an interesting taste because it leaves an interesting feeling in your mouth. It's called astringent. And think of persimmon if you haven't had persimmon, or unripe apple, or something that's really unripe and it leaves this chalky feeling in your mouth. So astringent is present in most chickpeas and lentils and broccoli, cauliflower, and sprouts. And it has a slightly drying effect. So this taste is amazing for weight loss. It's also a really great taste in terms of it feeds your microbiome, your bacteria, because bacteria loves anything related to cabbage. It loves lentils and chickpeas. So this is really an important taste to add, even though you don't need a lot of it, because having too much can lead to either bloating or constipation. So you just need a tiny little bit. Um, and here, so once you have the balanced plate, you're addressing all the macro and micro uh, nutrient needs for your body. So you're really making sure that your body gets everything that it needs. So there's no biochemical need for sugar. As a result, there's not um, not a lot of likelihood for cravings. And here, let's talk a little bit more about bitter greens, because I feel like it's such an important food to add. And I think a lot of people are slightly afraid of it because we are not sure how to cook them, for example. But also, there's a likelihood of overdoing on bitter greens and then feeling depleted or getting bloated or having constipation. So you really need to know how to balance that and how to add bitter greens to your diet so you get the benefits without feeling the negative effects of it. So bitter by itself is kind of a cooling, constricting, detoxifying taste. So it is usually included in all bitter greens, and most bitter greens are a nutritional superfood. They're rich in vitamin A, C, K, folate. So you really can't go wrong with a dark green. But what you need to know is to make sure that bitter greens don't have a negative effect on your digestive system or on your emotional state, which too much bitter taste can have. It's really important to balance it out with adding a little bit of fat. So most bitter greens are much better when you have either avocado added or olive oil, or you saute them in ghee. Basically what it does, it really helps for your body to absorb the nutrients. It also gets rid some of the bitterness, but also fat has the opposite qualities of bitters. You can also add a little bit of a spicy taste to make sure that it gets digested well. In general, bitter greens are a digestive magic. So for people who have sluggish digestion, adding a little bit of detoxifying effect of the bitter greens is a really good thing. And another thing that not a lot of people know is bitters help to balance our taste buds. So on our tongue, we can taste different tastes in different places, in different locations in the tongue. And oftentimes, our taste buds are so overly stimulated that it's really easy to get addicted to strong tastes, like strong tastes of processed sugar, or even strong tastes that come from vegan treats or paleo treats. But bitters help to balance it out and kind of bring your taste buds back into a neutral when you start tasting everything with so much more intensity. And I'm gonna at the end give you one herb that really makes a huge difference. It's a bitter herb and it really helps to balance out the taste buds. But even having some bitter greens like kale or arugula helps to neutralize that overstimulation of taste buds. And in 3 days or so, if you're not having sugar and having lots of bitter greens, when you taste one of your favorite sweets, it just might feel overpoweringly sweet, and you might not be craving it as much anymore. So I think that's really important to consider. And some other greens in terms of kale and arugula, which a lot of us are used to, I want you to explore other bitter greens, which include amaranth greens, which are so tender and they're usually available in spring, endive, broccoli rabe, dandelion greens, escarole, frisee, mizuna greens, rapini, radicchio, nettles, turnip greens, watercress. So those are my favorite ones. But if you look around, you can also probably find local ones that have a slightly bitter taste. So look for just dark green colors and explore them. From here, I want to mention the next stage that has a huge influence of whether you crave sugar or if you don't, and that's a sour taste. So remember, I mentioned in the beginning that sours help us produce saliva. The sour taste also makes us hungrier, along with salty. So both sour and salty have a similar function in this way. They improve the appetite. So oftentimes what happens when you have too much sour or salty, you're going to crave sweet to balance it out. So your body is inherently very wise. And whenever you go out to a restaurant, sometimes you don't really know how much salt is being put in the food. Or if you have sushi, for example, there's tons of salt in soy sauce. And what happens naturally is your body, after having something really sour or salty, will start to have more cravings. And in Ayurveda, for example, there's a saying that if you have lemon cookies or lemon cake, you're much more likely to overeat on that versus having something that doesn't have sour taste in it. So here, just pay attention how much salt there is in your food. And you might notice that when you re-regulate your taste buds, when you give them some rest and they're back to neutral, and you can again feel the intensity of your food, you might not be craving as much salt, and also you won't be craving as much sugar. So there's always a balance, and you either can intentionally create that balance, or your body will try to create that balance for you by having really strong cravings. So here's your opportunity to kind of bring your taste buds back to neutral and see if you can start creating balance intentionally on your own. So the next one is about mindfulness and slowing down. And I think most of you know that, or you heard it somewhere, or you read about it, but I bet not that many of you actually do that. Out of all women that I worked with, especially lunchtime, all of us are running around, we eat with a phone, we eat with a computer, so there's really no space to engage all of your five senses and to be filled to receive on all levels, physical, mental, emotional. You need to engage all of your five senses. And to engage all of your five senses, you need to slow down. And it doesn't have to be an hour, like hour-long meal during lunchtime, but taking at least 30 minutes to properly chew your meal, to be open to receiving on all levels, through your eyes, through the smell, on serving yourself on a plate, maybe even taking a proper napkin, not eating out of plastic, using utensils, and respecting yourself enough so you can turn off the technology or maybe put on good music. But being with food 100% so you can really fill yourself on all levels. Whenever that happens, and I think that's probably one of the most important tips, whenever that happens, the likelihood for cravings, whether it's sugar or any sort of other cravings, just goes away. And there's also a lot less likelihood of you overeating because, again, you're slowing down. You have that feedback from your body about being full much quicker. So imagine yourself being graceful, being intentional, and slowing down whenever you have your meals. Make it at least one meal a day, and make it a little me time where you do play around and engage with all of your senses. You can also turn it into your mindfulness meditation, so you get kind of two scores at once. You eat properly, you nourish yourself, but you also have a little bit of time to practice mindfulness. So I think this one is super important. Imagine that you're eating in a five-star restaurant and really take time to slow down. The next one goes hand in hand with this one because it's really easy to say slow down and pay attention, but it's really hard to actually do it. And partially it's hard to do it because we are accustomed to doing things the other way. We are accustomed to either eating in a rush or eating with technology around. So basically, we have a habit. And breaking habits is really hard. Actually, you can't break a habit. You can just form a new one. And that can be a whole other topic or a whole other class about changing habits. But let me just tell you that if you have this neural pathway in your brain, you can't just get rid of that neural pathway and take that habit out. It will always be there. It's a pattern that will always be a part of you. But what you can do is you can work and start creating a new pattern that's even stronger. And the way you do it, or the way I usually do it with my clients, is through visualization. And it's a super powerful technique that even elite sportsmen use, elite athletes. And basically, the way it works is you visualize yourself in a situation doing a new thing or doing a new habit um, in a new way. So you start forming a habit by not being in a stressful situation where you're very likely to fall back into the old pattern, but you're creating a new habit by repeating that in your mind, by visualizing yourself doing something. And the brain doesn't really know the difference, whether you do that in reality or whether you visualize it. The brain doesn't know a difference. Another thing that you can visualize is, for example, being completely indifferent to sweets or sitting at the table and with ease just pushing the sweets away, or just being relaxed at the table where you have sweets or desserts. And by going through that situation where you can stumble and get back into the old pattern of overeating on sweets or eating sweets whenever you're trying to stay away from them, whenever you prepare yourself mentally for that future situation and you go through that situation in your mind or visualize that, it becomes really easy to do that in reality. So it's really a matter of intentional preparation for the situation that can trigger you. And you can do it for a minute in the morning or before going to sleep, because in the first few minutes of you waking up and the few minutes of before you fall asleep, this is the time when your brain is the most perceptible. It really perceives and holds on to everything that you communicate or visualize. So this is your time to start building a new pattern, start building a new habit, and through visualization, start changing your behaviors in reality without necessarily relying on your willpower, but getting your subconscious on the same team as you. Because there's different numbers, but some scientists say that 96% of our behaviors are based on our subconscious beliefs or patterns. So it really serves a good purpose to engage subconscious. So it's on your team moving in the same direction. So the next one that I want to talk to is breathing. And breathing deeply is something that connects or something that addresses the problem of being in a fight or flight mode. So whenever you're stressed out, whenever you tense, whenever you feel that something bad is going to happen, or your to-do list is just never going to get finished, or your meeting is super stressful, the breath changes. And because of that, the chemical composition of your blood changes. And we're much more likely to start craving sugar and fat. And the quickest way to break that pattern, to activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the system that allows to rest, rejuvenate, digest well, is to breathe deeply. So through the breath, by slowing it down, by deepening it, by making it more relaxed, you really take control of the reaction of your nervous system, and as a result, can prevent sugar cravings from appearing in the first place. So I would say 3 times per day in the morning during maybe lunch or before lunch. And before going to sleep, really take a moment by placing your palms on your stomach, taking 10 deep breaths with an inhale, pressing your stomach slightly into your palms, and with an exhale, just let your stomach relax so it falls towards the spine. So it should feel like you're not sucking it in, but really relaxing it and softening. So that's also an effective prevention technique. The second one is one of my favorite and something that made a huge difference for me personally. It's about being willing to feel the emotions or to feel whatever is happening with you versus trying to explain it, to find a solution, or trying to understand where it comes from. So this is a technique that one of the actors taught me, and it's very simple. You don't have to wait for a stressful situation to start doing it. You can do it at any time, but basically it's being completely aware, present, and mindful of whatever is happening with you. So you're always there for yourself. You're always willing to experience whatever your body is trying to communicate. And it can start with a simple technique. Wherever you are right now, you can close your eyes and just bring your attention into your body and see if you can start noticing any feelings, emotions, sensations of like, I'm right there for you. This is something you can say to yourself. I'm willing to experience whatever comes up. And usually, when you do that, instead of trying to say, well, I'm angry, or I have this pattern, where does it come from my parent? How do I get rid of it? Being there without expectations, without trying to find a resolution, it really helps you to experience the intensity of the emotion before it starts triggering you to actually do something. And there's some research that shows that whenever you're fully there with emotion, feeling the intensity of the emotion will dissolve in 20 seconds or so. And it's not necessarily to understand what caused the emotion, where it came from, what memory it's associated with. You're just there. And as long as you're there, it's going to dissolve and shift into something else. Sometimes it's going to shift into something positive. Sometimes it's going to shift into something negative, but it will shift. And for me, when I started doing that, for a few nights in a row, I would wake up with this hot burning feeling around my chest and my shoulders. And I knew that was a very strong feeling of shame. I had no idea what it was coming from. I didn't know what memory it was associated with, but I was just willing to be there for that feeling, to be there for myself. And I would feel it, feel it, feel it, let it become so intense that I actually felt my skin burning, and then it would just dissolve and disappear. And it lasted probably for 3 days, every day in a row. But then it just felt so much lighter. I felt like I processed and released something that would probably take years in therapy in terms of trying to understand where it came from. And a lot of my clients have the same experience. There's usually something that we ignore in the body, and the body tries to communicate. And whenever you ignore it as a way to numb it or to escape from it, we go for sugar. So without any expectations, without trying to resolve it, just be there for yourself, especially when you feel something coming up. So we're almost close to an end, so stay with me here. We have 2 more left. So the next one is find your favorite non-food related way to ground and distress. So a lot of us tend to crave sweets whenever we're stressed out, whenever we don't feel grounded, because sweets, especially heavy sweets that have nuts or dairy in it, or some sort of a flour in it, they're very grounding. And whenever we feel frazzled, whenever we have so much to do and we have a tons of windows open on the computer and the to-do list is huge and we're talking to 10 people at the same time, we start feeling that we need to ground, and food is the quickest way to ground. So here, what you can do is find what other ways would help you to be grounded. And it can be just bringing your attention down into your feet. It can be connecting to the nature or looking far away, which is the opposite of looking at the computer or the phone all the time. But the same way as I said, make a list of things that make you feel loved and that you love. Make a list of things that make you feel grounded and help you distress, which are not food related. And that list is going to be super, super helpful. It should be something that's not difficult and that you can implement into your daily life. And now we're coming to an end. And the last tip is also really helpful. And it's something that you can start using that's not going to take as much mental work or thinking. It's actually something that can have an effect right away and you can use starting tomorrow. And that's use of herbs that will help to address the issue of cravings. And as I mentioned before, bitter taste is super helpful in preventing cravings. And one of the herbs that's bitter that has a wonderful, it has lots of clinical research, there's lots of support for its effectiveness, and it's called Gymnema sylvester. And in the blog that's related to the video, you can find the spelling. But basically what it does, it affects your taste buds in a way that that sweet taste, doesn't really taste good anymore. And some brands started adding gymnema to their teas. It has been used a lot for people with diabetes very effectively. And it also helps to regulate the production of insulin. So it's a wonderful herb to include in your tea, for example, in a small quantity. And it can have this sweet neutralizing effect, which is, it's quite fun to experience because suddenly you taste your favorite food and just doesn't taste that good anymore. So it really helps to break that pattern of associating pleasure with a particular food. And another, actually two more, is cinnamon. Cinnamon has this spicy, slightly sweet taste, and I think now it's a wonderful herb also to add to your healthier desserts. It's a great herb to add if you're baking apples or pears, for example, and it also helps to regulate blood sugar. And the third one is one of my favorites, and it's anise herb, or sometimes it's called fennel, even though it's a little bit different. So look for anise. And anise is a wonderful herb in terms of it helps with digestion, it helps with prevent bloating, but it also really helps with sugar cravings in terms of preventing, because it has a soothing, slightly sweet taste, and you can add it as a tea. You can have it with your oatmeal. You can just toast it with vegetables. So it's a really wonderful herb to have on hand. And that's kind of wraps up all my tips for you regarding preventing sugar cravings. I do hope that you start implementing them into your life, not all at once, but something that really resonated with you and you feel like this is something that I might try. Usually implementing one thing at a time really helps to make it effective, so you know what is it exactly that's helping you, instead of changing 10 things at a time and then not knowing which one exactly worked. So create an experiment, observe all variables, and you'll know what really creates a better result. And if you want to learn more about using Ayurveda to help your body get back into balance, you can always find me at spinachandyoga.com, and I have tons of resources for you there.